Now, experts are uncovering one of its secrets, a tunnel that was dug 2,000 years ago. It was discovered by accident after heavy rains opened a hole in the ground near its entrance, and a team is now working its way inside the caverns.
The rain in 2003 was relentless, but it wasn't the water that changed history. It was what the water revealed. When a sinkhole opened at the foot of the Feathered Serpent pyramid, Sergio Gómez expected dirt and stone. Instead, he found a sealed portal to a nightmare.
Now, in Mexico, more secrets have been revealed about the ancient city of Teotihuacan. Researchers have spent years digging beneath the surface to find remains of a settlement that's believed to date back more than 2,000 years.
Deep beneath the basalt, his sensors detected something impossible. A shimmering, toxic flow of liquid metal. Scientists called it a glitch. The ground-penetrating radar called it a river. The truth? Nobody can explain it. The anomaly beneath the basalt. It began as a technical discrepancy. In the archaeological world, you expect to find stone, bone, ceramic, or perhaps the organic decay of timber, materials that fit the profile of a city built nearly 2 millennia ago. But when the ground-penetrating radar, GPR, was first deployed across the plaza of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent at Teotihuacan, the return signals were chaotic. GPR works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the Earth and measuring the strength and time delay of the echoes that bounce back off buried structures. Normally, these echoes create a predictable map of soil density and stone foundations. Beneath this pyramid, however, the radar hit something that shouldn't have been there. A pocket of extreme conductivity that defied the standard signature of volcanic rock. The scientists at the site were initially skeptical of their own equipment. Liquid at that depth is usually groundwater, but groundwater doesn't reflect electromagnetic waves with the piercing intensity seen on the Teotihuacan monitors. The data suggested a substance that was incredibly dense, yet smooth and fluid, a material that behaved more like a mirror than a mineral. For months, the team at Teotihuacan wrestled with the possibility of a massive sensor malfunction. How could a civilization that relied on obsidian blades and manual labor leave behind a subterranean signature that looked more like industrial runoff than an ancient ruin? As the excavation progressed and the team began to physically penetrate the sealed tunnel, the GPR readings were finally validated, but the confusion only deepened. They weren't looking at a simple deposit or a natural geological vein. They found pools of liquid mercury, quicksilver, resting in the deepest recesses of a man-made cavern. The presence of this substance at Teotihuacan represents one of the most significant archaeological glitches in history. Scientists are still struggling to articulate how a culture without modern chemistry could accumulate enough of this toxic heavy metal to create what appeared to be a shimmering, flowing feature. The sheer logistics of the find are staggering. To have enough liquid mercury to create a river or a series of large pools, the builders would have had to process tons of cinnabar ore. This process requires a controlled high-heat environment to vaporize the mercury from the stone, and then a method to condense those vapors back into a liquid state. There is no evidence of a large-scale industrial facility within miles of the city. Furthermore, mercury was not a local resource. It had to be sourced from hundreds of miles away and transported in ceramic vessels that would have been incredibly heavy and prone to breaking. This leads to the central frustration for the research teams on the ground. The why is entirely eclipsed by the how. Every time a new GPR scan is run, it reveals more chambers and more anomalies, yet the presence of mercury creates a massive barrier for further study. It's a toxic shield. The vapor pressure in these enclosed spaces is high enough to cause neurological damage within minutes of exposure, meaning every inch of the discovery must be mapped with a level of caution usually reserved for nuclear waste sites. The radar tells us the mercury is there, and the physical samples confirm its purity, but the technical manual for how Teotihuacan managed it is completely missing. How do you explain a liquid metal signature in a Stone Age city? The chemistry of confusion. The discovery of liquid mercury at the heart of Teotihuacan has forced a radical reassessment of what we thought we knew about ancient chemical engineering. To understand why scientists are so perplexed, one must first understand the volatile nature of mercury itself. In the periodic table, mercury is represented as Hg, derived from the Greek hydrargyros, or water silver. It is the only metal that remains liquid at standard temperature and pressure. It is heavy, it is elusive, and most importantly, it is extremely rare in its pure elemental form. You don't simply dig a hole in the ground and find a silver river. Finding liquid mercury in a subterranean tunnel is essentially finding a refined industrial product in a prehistoric setting. The geological reality is that mercury is almost always found locked within cinnabar, a bright red sulfide mineral. To transform that red rock into the shimmering liquid found beneath the temple of the Feathered Serpent, the Teotihuacanos would have had to master a complex, multi-stage distillation process. This involves crushing the ore and heating it to temperatures exceeding 357 degrees Celsius. At this point, the mercury transitions from a solid state within the ore to a toxic vapor. That vapor must then be captured and cooled in a secondary chamber to condense back into the liquid metal we see today. For a civilization that had not yet entered the Bronze Age, a society that technically functioned using stone tools, this level of thermodynamic control is a massive technical anomaly. When the research team first identified the liquid pools using specialized vacuum equipment to prevent toxic exposure, the immediate question wasn't about the ritual, it was about the scale. We aren't talking about a few grams used for pigment or medicine. The volumes suggested by the GPR scans and the physical samples indicate a concentrated effort to accumulate a massive amount of the substance. This presents a logistical nightmare that contemporary archaeology struggles to resolve. If the mercury was processed on-site, where are the kilns? Where are the massive tailings of spent cinnabar ore that would inevitably be left behind? To produce even a small pool of liquid mercury, you would need to process hundreds of pounds of cinnabar. To produce a river, you would need an industrial operation that has, so far, left no trace in the city's archaeological record. Then there is the issue of origin. Geological testing of the mercury samples found at Teotihuacan indicates that the cinnabar likely came from several different mines, some located as far away as the modern-day Mexican states of Querétaro or Guerrero. This implies a coordinated, state-sponsored trade network dedicated entirely to the acquisition of a material that has no practical utility in agriculture, construction, or warfare. In a city of 100,000 people, where the primary concerns were water management and food distribution, the diversion of immense labor and resources to mine, transport, and refine toxic heavy metals is a decision that leaves modern economists and historians at a total loss. It represents a massive expenditure of energy for a purely subterranean result that almost no one in the living city would ever see. The chemical behavior of the mercury, once placed in the tunnel, adds another layer of complexity. The tunnel environment is humid and sealed. Over centuries, the liquid mercury slowly off-gases, creating an atmosphere that is saturated with mercury vapor. When the archaeologists first breached the tunnel, they didn't just find a mystery, they found a lethal environment. This raises a grueling question about the original construction. How did the workers survive the installation? Even if they were aware of the toxicity, the physical act of pouring and sculpting these pools in a cramped, poorly ventilated tunnel would have been a death sentence for the laborers involved. The neurological effects of mercury poisoning, tremors, hallucinations, and eventual organ failure would have manifested rapidly. Yet, the precision of the tunnel's layout suggests a project executed with calm, methodical accuracy. Scientists are currently looking for evidence of specialized containers or protective measures that might have been used, but the search has yielded little. There are no ceramic gas masks, no sophisticated ventilation shafts that would have cleared the fumes during the process. The presence of the mercury suggests a level of chemistry we didn't think they possessed, while the lack of safety infrastructure suggests a total disregard for human life or perhaps a technical solution that we are simply not seeing. This lack of a middle ground is what makes the find so frustrating for the academic community. You have a highly refined chemical product sitting in a primitive setting. with no clear path of how it got from point A to point B. Furthermore, the state of the Mercury after nearly 2,000 years is remarkably pure. It hasn't fully reacted with the surrounding minerals or been lost to the porous volcanic soil. This suggests the floors of the chambers were specifically treated or lined with a material to prevent the mercury from seeping into the earth, another engineering hurdle that required foresight and an intimate understanding of the metal's unique fluid dynamics. Every time a chemist looks at the data from Teotihuacan, they see a series of solved problems. The problem is, we don't know who solved them, or why they chose the most difficult material on Earth to work with. The presence of the metal is a miracle. The volume of it is a logistical nightmare. A sophisticated structure. The physical structure housing the mercury is as much of a technical anomaly as the metal itself. To reach the shimmering deposits, the builders of Teotihuacan had to execute an engineering project of staggering complexity, long before the advent of metal chisels or surveying lasers. The tunnel, which sits roughly 60 feet below the surface, stretches for 330 feet in a perfectly straight line, cutting through the dense, unforgiving volcanic breccia. This wasn't a natural fissure they expanded. It was a deliberate, calculated void carved into the bedrock of the city. The precision of the tunnel's orientation suggests that the architects possessed a highly developed understanding of subterranean surveying. In a dark, oxygen-deprived environment, maintaining a straight heading for over 100 yards requires more than just guesswork. Engineers today note that the deviation in the tunnel's path is minimal, implying the use of string lines, plumb bobs, or perhaps light reflection techniques that have since been lost. However, the most striking feature isn't the shape of the tunnel, but the treatment of its surfaces. As archaeologists moved deeper toward the mercury chambers, they discovered that the walls and ceiling were not bare rock. They had been meticulously coated in a thick layer of powdered pyrite, commonly known as fool's gold. When the tunnel was first unsealed, the effect of this coating was revealed. Under the light of a torch or a modern LED, the walls don't just reflect, they sparkle with a metallic golden luster. From a technical standpoint, the application of this pyrite is a mystery. Pyrite is a hard, brittle mineral. To turn it into a fine powder and then adhere it to a damp vertical rock face in a way that survives for 1,800 years requires a sophisticated binder. Chemical analysis is ongoing to determine if they used a plant-based resin or a mineral-based cement, but the sheer labor required to grind and apply thousands of pounds of pyrite powder is nearly immeasurable. This was an interior design project on a cosmic scale, hidden in a place where, theoretically, no one was ever supposed to go. The void was not empty when discovered. One of the most baffling aspects for the engineering teams was that the tunnel had been systematically filled from floor to ceiling with nearly 2,000 tons of debris. This wasn't a cave-in. It was a deliberate act of decommissioning. The fill consisted of carefully selected stones, soil, and even broken pieces of statues, packed so tightly that it took Sergio Gómez and his team nearly a decade to clear it. This raises a mechanical contradiction. Why exert the massive energy required to carve a precision-engineered tunnel, coat it in shimmering metallic powder, and install liquid mercury pools, only to fill the entire structure with rubble? From a structural engineering perspective, the backfilling served as a permanent seal, but the effort required to move 2,000 tons of material back into a 330-foot hole, one basket at a time, is an logistical feat that matches the construction of the pyramids themselves. It suggests that the river was never intended to be a public monument. It was a functional component of a machine or a ritual space that, once activated or completed, had to be erased from the physical world. The GPR scans show that even the entrance was disguised so effectively that it remained hidden for nearly 20 centuries, even as millions of tourists walked directly over it. As the team reached the end of the tunnel, they found that the floor had been sculpted into a miniature landscape. This wasn't a flat surface. It was a series of undulations, valleys, and pits designed to hold the mercury. This indicates that the creators understood the fluid dynamics of mercury. Because mercury has such high surface tension, it doesn't soak into the ground like water. It beads and rolls. The landscape was engineered to channel the silver liquid into specific reservoirs. This level of intentionality proves that the mercury wasn't an accidental spill or a secondary addition. The entire 330-foot architectural void was designed specifically to facilitate the presence of the metal. The engineering also had to account for the weight. Mercury is 13.5 times denser than water. A relatively small pool of it weighs as much as a modern car. The stone vessels, or depressions, carved into the tunnel floor had to be structurally sound enough to hold this immense weight without cracking the underlying bedrock. The scientists are left looking at a project that required geological surveying, chemical synthesis, atmospheric management, and massive labor coordination. It is a masterpiece of engineering that serves no clear utilitarian purpose. There are no drainage pipes for sewage, no ventilation for occupants, and no storage for grain. It is a monument to the impossible, a high-tech clean room built with Stone Age tools. The deeper the team digs, the more they realize that the tunnel wasn't just a path to the Mercury. It was a protective casing for it. The pyrite walls provided the visual environment, the sculpted floors provided the containment, and the 2,000 tons of debris provided the security. Every technical choice made by the Teotihuacanos seems designed to isolate this liquid anomaly from the rest of the world. We are left with a sophisticated structure that was built to be used once and then forgotten, leaving us to wonder about the original intent behind such a massive investment of human capital. If the tunnel was meant to be seen, why was it filled with 2,000 tons of debris? The robot's perspective. When the physical risks to human life became too great, the mission at Teotihuacan shifted from traditional archaeology to a high-tech reconnaissance operation. The atmosphere within the deepest sections of the tunnel was not just stale, it was saturated with mercury vapor. In such an enclosed, humid environment, the concentration of mercury gas was far beyond what any standard respirator could filter safely for long-duration work. To see what lay ahead without risking neurological collapse, the team turned to a custom-engineered solution, a small, remote-controlled robot named Tlaloc 2-TC. Named after the ancient god of rain, this robot was designed to be the eyes and ears of the scientific team in spaces that had been sealed since the 2nd century. Weighing about 77 pounds and equipped with four-wheel drive and a suite of sophisticated sensors, Tlaloc 2-TC represented a bridge between modern robotics and ancient engineering. Its primary mission was to navigate the narrow, debris-choked passages and reach the final chambers that the ground-penetrating radar had identified as the core of the anomaly. The robotic deployment provided a forensic look at the site that would have been impossible for a human observer. Using infrared cameras and laser scanners, LiDAR, the robot began to map the final 3 chambers in high-definition 3D. As the robot's wheels churned through the damp soil, its video feed sent back images that stunned the control room. It confirmed the presence of large quantities of liquid mercury, but it also revealed something else: a collection of hundreds of mysterious yellow spheres, ranging from 1.5 to 5 inches in diameter. These spheres, nicknamed disco balls by the researchers, added another layer of technical confusion to the site. Analysis showed they were made of clay but coated in jarosite, a yellow mineral that forms from the oxidation of iron pyrite. Like the powdered pyrite on the walls, these spheres were engineered to glitter. The robot's sensors indicated that these objects were not scattered randomly. They were placed with intent, likely floating in or surrounding the mercury pools during the site's active use. The mechanical arms of the robot allowed for the retrieval of samples without disturbing the delicate atmospheric balance of the chamber, proving that the yellow coating was a deliberate chemical application. The most critical data provided by the robot, however, was the atmospheric reading. The sensors detected that the air in the final chambers was so toxic that it acted as a chemical lock. This raises a fascinating forensic question. Did the builders of Teotihuacan know that the mercury would create a lethal barrier? If the intent was to protect whatever lies in the chambers beyond the mercury, be it a royal burial or a sacred cache, the use of mercury as a neurotoxic gas trap is a remarkably effective, albeit gruesome, security system. It is a passive defense mechanism that requires no moving parts and never needs to be reset. Tlaloc 2-TC also discovered that the tunnel system was not just a straight line, but ended in a cross shape, with chambers branching off to the north and south. The robot's infrared sensors picked up thermal signatures that suggested these chambers might lead even deeper into the pyramid's foundation. However, the mechanical limits of the robot were tested by the environment. The high humidity and the corrosive nature of the mercury vapors posed a constant threat to the robot's circuitry. Every hour of operation required a meticulous cleaning process to ensure the metallic fumes didn't degrade the sensors or the motorized joints. The data gathered by the robot remains the most detailed record we have of the quicksilver core. It allowed scientists to measure the depth of the mercury pools and the exact dimensions of the chambers without a single human drawing a breath of the toxic air. The robotic mission transformed the site from a dusty excavation into a high-stakes investigation of ancient chemical warfare or cosmic modeling. It showed us that the Teotihuacanos weren't just building with stone, they were manipulating the very elements of the earth to create an environment that was fundamentally hostile to the living. Silicon and steel could survive the fumes, but the creators of this place only had bone and stone. Global comparison: the Mercury Standard. When news of the liquid mercury at Teotihuacan reached the international scientific community, the forensic focus shifted halfway across the globe. This is not because of a suspected cultural exchange, but because the find at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent mirrors the most famous archaeological legend in history: the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. In the case of the Chinese site, historical records from the Han Dynasty claim that the emperor was buried in a sprawling necropolis, where the 100 rivers, the Yangtze, and the Yellow River, and the Great Sea were made to flow with mercury. For decades, historians treated these accounts as colorful metaphors or hyperbolic legends. However, modern soil analysis and core sampling around the unexcavated mound in Xi'an have revealed mercury concentrations nearly 100 times higher than natural background levels. The technical parallel between a 2nd century Mexican city and a 3rd century BCE Chinese tomb is striking. In both instances, we see the elite of the ancient world choosing a substance that is uniquely difficult to handle and inherently lethal. From a chemical perspective, mercury represents a liminal state of matter. It is a metal, yet it flows. It is heavy, yet it reflects light like a mirror. For the engineers of these two disparate civilizations, mercury seems to have served as the ultimate medium for representing perpetual motion. Because mercury does not evaporate at the same rate as water and maintains its metallic sheen indefinitely in a sealed environment, it provided an eternal, unchanging surrogate for liquid in a place where real water would have long ago seeped into the earth or stagnated into rot. But the Mercury Standard goes beyond mere symbolism. It highlights a global mastery of metallurgy that defies the primitive label often assigned to these eras. To create these subterranean features, both the Teotihuacanos and the laborers of the Qin dynasty had to solve the exact same set of industrial problems. They had to understand the distillation of cinnabar, the management of toxic vapors, and the structural requirements for containing a fluid with a massive specific gravity. In China, the sheer scale of the rumored rivers suggests an industrial output of mercury that would not be matched in Europe for another millennium. At Teotihuacan, the presence of the metal suggests a similar, albeit smaller scale, command over high-heat chemistry. Why does liquid seem to be a universal requirement for these high-status sites? Scientifically, the use of mercury creates a dead zone that preserves the integrity of the site by killing off microbial life and deterring looters. It is an inadvertent, or perhaps intentional, form of chemical embalming for an entire room. In both Teotihuacan and Xi'an, the mercury serves as a physical barrier that separates the world of the living from the frozen world of the dead. It is a material that occupies two states at once, making it the perfect technical choice for a site designed to exist between two worlds. The comparison also forces us to look at the economic cost. The Mercury Standard implies that the value of the material was high enough to justify the deaths of thousands of miners and processors. In the Qin tomb, the mercury rivers were reportedly powered by mechanical pumps to keep them flowing. While we haven't found evidence of mechanical pumps at Teotihuacan, the landscape of the floor was engineered to use gravity to maintain the pooling of the liquid. In both cases, the mercury was used to create a simulated reality, a high-tech, silver-plated version of the natural world. The fact that these two civilizations arrived at the same chemical solution for their most important monuments is a testament to the predictable nature of human engineering when faced with the problem of eternity. If you want to build something that never changes, never dries up, and never allows life to encroach, Mercury is the only naturally occurring substance that fits the bill. The scientific confusion doesn't stem from the choice of material. It stems from the fact that these cultures possessed the refined chemical knowledge to produce it in the first place. We are left looking at two different corners of the map, seeing the same shimmering, toxic silver reflecting the same level of unattainable ancient expertise. Is this a coincidence of chemistry or a blueprint we haven't decoded yet? The missing variable. Despite the precision of the GPR scans and the successful deployment of robotic scouts, the investigation at Teotihuacan has reached a frustrating scientific stalemate. We have the refined chemical substance, the expertly engineered tunnel, and the glittering pyrite environment. But we are missing the one variable that would provide a logical anchor for the entire project: a human presence. In almost every other archaeological context of this magnitude, a feature as elaborate as a mercury-filled subterranean chamber would serve as the final resting place for a high-ranking individual. Yet, after years of meticulous clearing and scanning, the quicksilver core remains a tomb without a body. The ground-penetrating radar shows several more anomalies and walled-off chambers beyond the current reach of the excavation. However, the presence of the mercury has created a dead zone that complicates every attempt at further entry. It isn't just the physical toxicity. It is the way the mercury interacts with our modern sensing equipment. Liquid metal is highly reflective to radar pulses, creating a ghosting effect on the digital maps. These reflections can hide smaller objects or mask the entrances to side chambers, leaving the scientific team to guess at the true layout of the pyramid's deepest foundations. We are essentially blinded by the very brilliance of the material the Teotihuacanos left behind. This lack of biological remains has forced scientists to reconsider the why through a purely functional or technical lens. If it isn't a tomb, is it a ritual engine? Some researchers have proposed that the mercury was meant to be a literal viewing port, a giant toxic mirror that allowed the elite to look down into a simulated underworld. The chemical stability of the mercury would ensure that this mirror never tarnished, providing a permanent interface between the city above and the void below. But even this theory fails to explain the sheer logistical cost of the operation. You do not move mountains of earth and refine tons of ore just to build a mirror that is then immediately buried under 2,000 tons of rubble. The mystery is compounded by the fact that the mercury remains in its liquid state. In most archaeological sites, liquids evaporate or react with the soil over centuries, leaving only stains or mineral deposits. The fact that the Teotihuacan mercury is still fluid suggests that the sealing of the tunnel was nearly hermetic. The missing variable might not be a body at all, but rather a lost understanding of how this civilization viewed living materials. To the people of Teotihuacan, mercury might not have been a passive decoration. It might have been seen as a potent, active substance that needed to be housed rather than merely stored. Current efforts are focused on developing new filtration systems and specialized containment units that would allow humans to enter the chambers without the risk of instant neurotoxic poisoning. Until then, we are in a state of suspended animation. We can see the silver rivers through the grainy lens of a robot's camera, and we can map the anomalies with our radar, but the true nature of the site remains shielded by a 1,800-year-old chemical barrier. The deeper we look, the more we realize that the mercury was not the end of the mystery, but a protective layer designed to keep the final secret out of reach. We are standing at the finish line of a race we don't even know the name of. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and watch out for future uploads.